to welcome you to the session on social impact, new trends in social impact management. My name is Agata Fortuna, and I'm working as a senior project and training specialist at Koç University Social Impact Forum. I have pleasure to host two speakers from Social Value International, Catherine Manning and Ben Carpenter. Catherine, Ben, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Agata. Perhaps I'll go first. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you, Agata, and thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to be part of this event today. Obviously, I would prefer to be there in person in Istanbul or Turkey. Your hospitality is always exceptional, so I cannot be with you. But it's an honor, nonetheless. My name is Ben. I'm Chief Executive of Social Value International, and I'm looking forward to talking to you today about social value, social impact, because that's what we do, our network. Social Value International is a membership body, an organization that creates networks around the world with a shared mission to change the way the world accounts for value. And I'm very, very proud that I'll be working alongside yourself, the Turkish chapter network of Social Value International. So thank you for the opportunity to join us.
Great, and I'll say hello as well now. Once, just as Ben has said, thank you very much for having us join you today. It's really great to be able to see you all. Some people that we know already, and lots of new faces as well. As Ben says, it would have been wonderful to be able to join you in person, and hopefully we'll be able to do that at some time in the future as our movement continues to grow. My name's Catherine Manning, and I'm the Operations Manager for Social Value International and also for Social Value UK. And I also run and manage the assurance and accreditation services. So today, Ben and I will be speaking both from, Ben will be speaking more towards the international perspective, and I'll be bringing some of the information from Social Value UK, and specifically some of the things around the assurance and accreditation work that we do as well.
Thank you, Catherine. So we are at a conference of a Turkish Social Enterprise Entrepreneurship Network. This session about social impact is, I think, very crucial, because the social impact is something that differentiates like the traditional businesses from social enterprise, that differentiates social enterprises from traditional businesses. But from our experience, we know that there is still a lot of confusion around the topic of social value and social impact. And we know that not all social enterprises manage their impact. Like according to the British Council report, like only slightly more than half of social enterprises in Turkey questioned admitted that they actually measure the impact. On the other hand, the ecosystem research that we conducted also states that like over 60% of questioned of interviewees say that there is no access to methodologies, or they don't have access to methodologies on social impact. So despite the fact that this is like the crucial element, there is still so many confusion. Like, could you tell us like a little bit more about the place of social value and social impact in organizational management and the SVI's approach on the topic?
Yes, absolutely. Perhaps I'll go first, Catherine. I'll return to our mission statement, which I briefly mentioned, which is Social Value International wants to change the way the world accounts for value. So our network is very much around that measurement piece, measurement, accounting. And we believe that all organizations need to account for value in a different way. We are very familiar with accounting for financial value, and this has evolved over hundreds of years. And anywhere you go in the world now, a business or a social enterprise can produce a set of financial accounts that people will read and interpret, and you can understand the financial value of the business. We want that definition of value to be broadened. So those accounts don't just include finance, but they also include social or environmental impact of the business. So our mission is to help standardize that process, make sure methodologies are available, and people are broadening their definition of value, and they are measuring it and they are accounting for it. You mentioned social enterprises, and of course, most of you here today are linked to a social enterprise. I don't need to tell you that social enterprises are designed to create positive social impact. That's by their very definition, they're set up to create some sort of social or environmental difference, as opposed to financial, combining financial value and non-financial value. But it is really important then that social enterprises don't just relax and think, well, I'm a social enterprise, I don't need to measure. In fact, they should be seeing that as crucial to their operation, just in the same way that a business seeking financial profit focuses very much on the financial value. A social enterprise needs to be concentrating as much on the amount of impact they're creating. So it really is something that we enjoy working with social enterprises to establish better frameworks for them to understand the impact they're having on people and the environment. And so we work with social enterprises to help them embed this process. But actually, we also work with all types of organizations, because it is businesses that can also create positive social impact, positive impact on the environment, or they want to manage that. So our network is very wide and diverse, and we work with social enterprises, but we also work with businesses and governments, and we try and get all organizations to kind of take a similar approach so that it can be understood from different perspectives.
Great, and I think I'll just add a couple of points to that. So obviously I'm the assurance manager, so assurance is always on the tip of my tongue, but it is a really important part of the work that Social Value International does across the globe, and we're looking there at I think one of the points that you'd raised in the question, Agata, was around that people perhaps don't think that there's methodology out there, or they're not sure which ones what to use. And I'd say actually there's a forest of tools. There's lots and lots of different pieces of guidance and support and information out there for people to be able to use, which is great. However, it can be confusing as you're starting off. And so one of the things that Social Value International is working with our network across the globe is about increasing or raising standards of practice, so that we're all working within the application of a set of principles, and doing that to a reasonable level or a comparable level, no matter what type of organization it is that you're working in. Like Ben said, it's every type of organization, but then sort of applying those principles to a particular standard. And Social Value International plays an assurance role in that, sort of helping and assisting individuals to be able to develop their standards of practice and become accredited as practitioners, or looking at reporting and the way that people are developing reports or their accounts of social value, and then also looking at organization and the practice that organizations are putting in place to continuously improve their own activities, and therefore the social value that they're creating through their activities. So that's very sort of broadly the assurance services. I said I'd speak a little bit from a Social Value UK perspective as well, and I know so Social Value UK is an example of a joint member network of Social Value International, so with the national network, and Social Value Turkey are developing a network in Turkey as well, and there's other ones around the globe too. So the sort of role of the joint member network, we are linked to and also advocating for the same mission as Social Value International, but then we're taking those standards of practice and working with members on the ground and in the context of the UK to make those principles applicable to the context here in the UK, and that's what would be going on in Turkey and in the other networks around the globe. So I think that's an important point as well, that whilst there's these standards of practice, it's really important to make sure that they're contextualized to the right type of organisation, or the geography or the demographics or the groups of people that you're actually working with.
Thank you, Catherine. And we used to associate the social impact with the third sector, but like in the recent years, I mean, like here we talk about like social enterprises, but actually like the social impact has been, the concept of social impact has been evolving and has entered the agenda of many other actors. And like we start to talk about like impact economy. Can you please tell us more about the place that the social value occupies or should occupy on the agenda of different actors and different organizations, like the public sector, the private sector, social enterprises, CSOs, impact investors. Can you tell us, like, what do you do with those different actors, and also how maybe they can support like the development of the social impact, and how they can contribute actually to increasing practices and accounting for social value?
Some great points in there, Agata, and I guess I'll speak first just from the UK perspective, because I guess we've got quite a lot of practical experience of working with the different sectors on the ground, and I think more like Ben's mentioned right up front, it's not just the role of one sector or one type of organisation to own social impact or to be able to have a social impact. What we're talking about is changes in people's lives, and that can come through from any type of organisation, public, private or civil society. So I suppose some of the practical things that have been happening here in the UK, and there's some things that are specific to the network, but it's also about the broader ecosystem within which we're working. And so for example, with the public sector, there's been developments in different legislation here. So in 2012, there was the implementation of something called the Social Value Act, or the Public Services Act, and this put into legislation a responsibility for public sector contracts to consider social, environmental and economic well-being as a part of public sector contracts. Now that was 2012, and there's been developments with that legislation and the way that people are implementing that or interacting with that, both as public sector organisations and then really importantly as the private sector organisations who are then winning or being contracted to deliver those public sector services. So there's been different levels of practice throughout those years, and increasingly sophisticated or increasing developed ways that people are thinking about social value in that context. So I think that's a really interesting part of what's been going on in the ecosystem here in the UK. Now, it's not just about the Social Value Act and public sector procurement. Even if we were just talking about procurement, the possibilities with that are far beyond what would just be procurement from a public sector perspective. So any type of organisation would be procuring services, and so there's a lot of work that's been going on around social value and good working practices in supply chains as well. I suppose an example that's linked to that Social Value UK had recently set up is a Contract for Change thought leadership group that was looking at social value and procurement and developing a principles-based approach to understanding and working with social value through a commissioning and procurement and contract management cycle. So it's not just about making promises up front, but also about how do you manage that social value over time. So that's very much linked to the private sector businesses as well. And I suppose an interesting point from here in the UK is that we've had increasing interest from the private sector. So our sort of private sector membership a few years ago would have been 15-20%, and we've gone up to almost 50% of the membership coming from private sector businesses. So that's an increasing interest and engagement in the sector, and there's some good projects going on in there, particularly around the built environment. And the effects that can have on people's lives. And finally, like we sort of said right from the beginning, the charity and social enterprise sectors, social impact's very much embedded in the core of what these organisations do. Perhaps the language could be slightly different sometimes. We talk about social value versus impact or social impact, but the actual premise is the same, and it's very much core to what people are doing there. So I'll stop from the UK perspective and pass over to Ben now.
Ben?
Oh, thanks, Catherine. I think, I can say you're right. You know, this is lots of players in the ecosystem are interested in measuring social impact and making different decisions. So at the international level, it's worth adding to what Catherine's talked about, the rise of impact investment, social investment, where investors are specifically investing for impact. I use the language of EVPA, where they're investing money and they want to see impact, positive impact, as well as a financial return. So that world of impact investing is growing by the day, by the week. It's I don't know the figures to hand, but certainly I'm sure you're all aware of that. And I know in Turkey, impact investing is starting to grow quite significantly. The other type of investment is worth mentioning is the mainstream financial markets. You may have heard of ESG investing, which stands for environmental, social, and governance. So this is, you know, mainstream investment, your pension funds, your institutional investment, starting to make different decisions based on environmental, social, and governance factors. So in the UK and other countries, I've seen a lot of pension funds deciding not to invest in fossil fuels or companies that harm the environment or have bad working practices in their supply chain. So that's really exciting to think that mainstream capital markets, huge flows of money that make the world go round, are starting to think differently. And recently I was reading about the amount of wealth in the world that is being transferred from an older generation to a younger generation is huge. We're talking about trillions of dollars is being transferred to a younger generation of people that have very different values. In the 21st century, young people with money want to make a difference. And so the UN Sustainable Development Goals are an important factor then in channeling this investment with younger people inheriting wealth. They want to make a difference. And so it's an exciting time, I think, for the world of investment and mainstream financial markets. And Social Value International are beginning to learn about this because we are part of the Impact Management Project And that's a project that's worth looking at, because that's trying to bring together some of the big standard setters across the world to kind of standardize what good impact looks like, so that investment can be made more responsibly. So I'll pause there. I just wanted to add that to what Catherine was saying.
Okay. So it really seems that like we are getting, you know, like that the dynamic is growing, like for development or the impact ecosystem, and we are slowly growing like this impact economy, like that actually like makes me really excited, like seeing that it's really becoming like mainstream, and it's not only associated like with certain actors. But I was wondering like whether there are any obstacles and what are the needs to facilitate this growth.
Yeah, I'll take this one first, perhaps, Catherine. You're right, Agata. The movement is growing, and it's exciting that social impact, social value is going mainstream. That was the title of our conference last year. But we still have a long way to go. There are big challenges. And one of the big challenges is measuring social impact, social value, accounting for it is still largely a voluntary exercise. There isn't enough regulation or legislation, laws that require it. So I think one of the challenges is people are doing this voluntarily still, and there isn't a recognized standard, and particularly around checking this information. So with finance, and I come back to that analogy, everywhere you go in the world, there are laws and regulation and legislation that protects investors in terms of financial value. So we do need more of this to ensure that social and environmental impact in the reporting is consistent and reliable. Because at the moment, I think it's still, people are choosing what to report, and that's a bit of a challenge. So I think we do need stronger policies, stronger regulation. But in the meantime, we need strong leadership and organizations to be bold and perhaps go one step further and be more transparent and more accountable to their stakeholders. So yeah, I think big challenges are lack of regulation, legislation, and also people's willingness to be more transparent and go further. So yeah, Catherine, I don't know if you have any other obstacles in mind.
Yeah, well, I'll be bringing it back to the assurance and accreditation piece once again, but perhaps just a slightly different angle on that. And I suppose what I kind of mentioned before, there is this sea of different information out there, but one of the things that's that you can see as beneficial through the community of Social Value International is all of the practitioners coming together as a community of practitioners from across the globe and working together to develop and share problems and come up collectively with solutions, and continuously trying to work out what's the best way of putting this into practice in their own context. But the best way of being able to do that is with your peer network and actually sharing. So I think collaboration is definitely a key piece if we want to continue to grow the impact economy. I think there's something around I think there was one point, again, I'm coming back to this point you'd mentioned at the beginning about people not thinking, oh, well, where do I start? And something we definitely talk about a lot here in the UK through some of our projects, and certainly with smaller organisations, is to just have a go. Just start and say, well, if we care about people's lives and we think we're having an effect on people's lives, just have a go at getting some information and starting to use that for decision making. And one particular project that we're working on here in the UK with charities and social enterprises is the Inspiring Impact programme, and there's loads of free resources and helpful short guidance to just give things a go, and in a way that's not too prescriptive, not too rigorous. It's just trying to put things into place that's right for your size of organisation and for the amount of resource that you've got available. And now the other side of that then is being able to check that practice. So even if you're putting things into place that are that's perhaps less rigorous than a large multinational organisation, you can still do that in a way that's aligned to the social value principles. And we've been working on working with organisations in developing their organisational practice through the social value management certificate, which is sort of guided pathway of organisational development, right? So I think there's things like that that are really important for developing those standards of practice, but also being a supportive community of one another and sharing that practice between each other. So I think that's just some additional points I'd add.
So we already mentioned that, like at the moment, those norms and standards on social impact measurement and reporting are actually voluntarily. Like we, when it comes to like financial accounting, like everyone follows the same rules, and like it's quite transparent, and I think it creates the common language. When it comes to the social impact, like we still don't have this like commonly accepted standards, but they are norms and standards like that we can adopt like voluntarily. Like, can you tell us a little bit more about social value principles and standards that you actually developed the methodology of?
Oh, Agata, I thought you'd never ask. No, of course. Very happy to talk about these standards, because Social Value International's role is to create these standards, and we do this collaboratively. So we do this with our networks around the world and our members. And so being part of our network means that you can contribute to the development of standards. So let me talk about that. So Social Value International's approach is a principles-based approach to measuring and accounting for value. So that means that we think there is a standard set of principles, and you can apply those principles to a certain standard. We don't believe there are a standard set of metrics or measurements or indicators that everybody should use. I don't think that's possible. There is not one list of all of the outcomes and all of the indicators, and everybody should just look at this catalogue of indicators. We don't believe that's possible because of the different types of organizations, the different contexts. So we really believe that principles should be adopted. And these principles are actually quite simple. There's 7. The first one is about involving stakeholders, and that means speaking to people. So very simply, and this may sound obvious, if you are measuring social impact, you need to speak to people. You need to talk, you need to listen, you need to have dialogue and engagement with the people whose lives are changing. So that's principle number 1, and it's the most important, really. And I'm sorry if this sounds really obvious, but too often when it comes to measurement, that dialogue between the people that experience the impact and those that are measuring it is not good enough. So that's one of the principles that we really push for, and it's about giving more of a voice to people, people that don't often have power, who are not able to hold organizations to account. It's about saying, here you go, tell me whether your life has changed. Is your life better, worse? How is it better? How can we improve it? So it's that dialogue really which creates an accountability framework. And then the other principles on top of this are about accounting for different types of change, positive change, but also negative change. Understanding the relative importance of these changes That's another principle about valuing what matters. So understand what changes in people's lives and which ones are most important. And then we have other principles around transparency, not overclaiming, and verification, which I'm sure Catherine will talk to in a second. So these principles are quite simple, and I'll shut up now and let you read about them. Perhaps we'll send a link. And I think the final thing for me to say is that there is a lot of convergence now around these principles. So you will look at them and you will say, yes, okay, we are already doing this principle. And you look at this tool over here, this is very consistent with the principles. So there is a brilliant guide for maximizing your impact for social entrepreneurs. Agata, you're smiling because we worked on this together. And it is great. And it also is consistent with the principles. So these principles can be applied to other guidance. And I think it's a really exciting time, because whilst there is a forest, as Catherine said, of tools and things to engage with when measuring impact, if you look at just the principles, these are actually being applied all over the world, and more support for all of them. So yeah, I can talk about the principles all day. I will stop. And maybe Catherine, if you have anything else to add.
Great, thank you, Ben. So yeah, I suppose there's just a couple of points, and this is continuing the flow of the principles. The last two, or the sixth one is around transparency, and I found this. I've actually transparency is my favourite principle at the moment, so I'm a big fan. But I do think it's a really important thing to bear in mind, and something that I've seen much more externally to the Social Value International Network being highlighted over and over again, and that being transparent about the data that you have, how it's being gathered, and how it's being used to make decisions is hugely important for people to be able to gain trust in what the decisions are that's been made. I mean, that's been so fundamental to where things have been working and not working during the crisis that we've all been living through in different ways in our countries. Been lots of discussions about that here in the UK, and people being able to see and understand why decisions are being made, and where that information is really important when we're talking about social value and social impact. Because if we're talking about social impact, we're talking about changes to people's lives, there is subjectivity to that, and there are professional judgments that we're all going to have to make, and we need to be clear about why we're making those, and how we're making those decisions, and what's being included and what's not being included. And that's helpful for people to be able to understand and trust in the information that's that you've included. But it can also help then for learning and saying, well, why did we make that decision this time around, and perhaps we would do something slightly different next time. Now, that's the sort of transparency piece, and that sort of leads into the final principle, which is around verification. Now, obviously, that very clearly links to the external verification piece that could come through engaging with an external assessor, but it can also come through just speaking to some people, having a critical friend, talking to somebody else in your organisation, or a different organisation that perhaps works in the same sector. It's about that collaboration piece is really important there. But then finally, fundamentally, and this is very much core to the idea of verification from a Social Value International perspective, is that if we're talking about changes to people's lives, we should be going back to the people that we're claiming value from and checking that that information is right, verifying directly with the people whose lives are being affected. And that's very much core to one of the whole pieces of the SVI framework, that this is about accountability. We're talking about accounting, but it's about accountability, and accountability to the people whose lives are actually being affected. And that's why in our conversations and in a lot of what underpins the SVI framework, we talk about power and different power dynamics, and amplifying the voices of those with little power in the activities that we're engaging in, and a key part of that is continuing that feedback loop and continuing those conversations with those that we're talking to and about, and claiming value from. I suppose with that, it's a key point in there that this measurement is not, it's not just about claiming the positive and being able to say how good we are. It's about being accountable for our actions. So yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think like we could talk a lot more about it, as it's actually like the core, you know, like of the SVI. Let's just maybe dream for a minute, and let's just think of what's the future of social impact management. So we know that there is still a lot to do, but how do you think like it will look in the future, like the social impact management?
Yeah, so a great question. So what could we dream things to be? And I suppose that's sort of a little bit linked to what I was just touching on in that question, that last bit before, that one of the things that we really want to encourage and to see as we progress is that reporting has to lead to action. We could create a wonderful social impact or social return on investment report, and even if that got assured by Social Value International, it's met all of the principles, it looks wonderful, we've published it. But if that then doesn't lead to any action, if it's just a report that sits there and we continue with our activities exactly the same as before, then it's just a marketing report there. We're just saying we've done these things and we're just continuing as we were before. And we're missing the opportunity there to be able to improve our own activities, but fundamentally to be able to improve the lives of those who we are affecting every day with the activities that we're doing. So I think what we hope and what we dream for the future is that social impact becomes fundamental to the way that we're making decisions within our organisation, no matter what sector we're from, whether we're a social enterprise, a private business, a charity, a public sector organisation, you know, international body. We start making decisions that are fundamentally integrated between the financial, the social, the environmental and the economic. And I suppose that leads to another point that we'd like to see in the future of social impact, and can see this starting to happen more, is that people start having that information actually integrated, right? So we've got views of the financial the performance of the organization, but we're also reporting continuously and consistently on other forms of value or other forms of capital. Don't know if my oh no, I think I've come back on. I think my internet went a little bit unstable there. So good. Now, just a couple of organisations or projects that are kind of working in this area. One's the Capitals Coalition. So this is that had developed understandings of human and social capital and natural capital previously. That's come together into the Capitals Coalition and is working with organisations across the globe to be able to measure different forms of capital and do that in a continuous way over time, so that decisions that are being made strategically in management and at a delivery level for the organisations is not just based on financial performance. Another Another example from the UK is about changes that need to be made to legislation. So we have a campaign called How Do Companies Act? And it's been a collaborative campaign between organisations here in the UK, including Social Enterprise UK, who I think had joined you previously, pushing for legislative change into what companies are actually required to do in the piece of legislation here in the UK called the Companies Act, that guides how organisations have to act here in the UK, so that social and environmental is core to what the responsibilities are, from the leadership level all the way down. So I think those are some things that we're really hoping for in the future. I don't know if Ben's got anything else to add, but perhaps that's
our time is running up, and I want to ask one more question. There is one question coming also from the audience. Maybe I will ask firstly, like quickly, as if we are preparing to launch Social Value Turkey, how do you think it can benefit the Turkish social impact ecosystem? How different actors can benefit from Social Value Turkey? What kind of organization should think about becoming a member? Ben, maybe? Ben, you are muted. You are muted. No, it's okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure what happened there. Yeah, I think the network is important to bring together all of the conversations from different sectors. Like we talked about at the beginning, social impact, social value is important for social enterprises, but it's also important for businesses, and it's also important for government. So one of the great things about having a network in Turkey is to bring all of those players together, so that when we talk about social impact, social value, we use the same language, the same words, and we have a common understanding of how we can measure it, or at least the best way that we can measure it. So very quickly, because we're out of time, I think it's appropriate for all types of businesses, and I would encourage the network to be as diverse as possible.
Thank you, Ben. So I want to also give a place for one question from the audience, because I think it's really interesting. When talking about social impact, which one is more important? Quantity of people that you reached, or quality and sustainability of the impact?
In terms of the measurement, is that a question about, is it important to speak to lots of people?
I think it's about like which kind of impact is more important, like the quantity, so the outreach, like how many people that you reached, or the quality of the outcomes created, and sustainability.
Well, I think I understand the question, and I would say that organizations need to know how much of an impact they're having on people's lives. And it's okay if they just have a little bit of impact on people's lives, but it's for a lot of people. But another organization might work with fewer people, but have a bigger impact. So there's no right or wrong. Some organizations will create huge amounts of impact with 3, 4, 5 people. A different organization will create less impact, but with hundreds of people. So we acknowledge that there's no right or wrong. People offer different services, but it's about trying to understand how much impact we're having on people's lives, and then multiplying it with the quantities as well. So in terms of measurement, it's important to do both qualitative and quantitative to understand the depth of impact and the scale of impact. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you very much. I think we don't have any other questions, and like we are just on time, like we used our assigned time like to the very last minute. So I would like to thank you very much, and I think that altogether also Turkish Social Entrepreneurship Network, like we will move towards those more standards and making the standards more mainstream in Turkey as well. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Catherine, for being with us today.
Thank you. And maybe I just have a final remark. Please don't feel intimidated by measurement. This is a journey. Catherine talked about that. And what you're doing is very inspiring, and part of this whole movement is to think about what social enterprises are and then think about measurement as part of that as well. So thank you for the opportunity to be part of the event today, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you very much from me as well. It's been an absolute pleasure to join you today.
Agata'cığım çok teşekkürler. Ben ve Catherine'e tekrar çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Ve konferansımızın Türkiye Sosyal Girişimcilik Ağı Köprüler Kurmak konferansının ilk günün aslında sonuna geldik. Bugün neler
the last session of the first day of our conference.
Pardon, ben çeviriyi duyuyorum ve duymak istemiyorum aslında. Onu nasıl sağlayabiliriz? Belki teknik ekip halleder. Bugün neler yaşadık aslında sabahın 9-9.30'undan beri. Çok böyle hızlıca onu sizlere hatırlatmak istiyorum. Açılış konuşmalarıyla birlikte Türkiye Sosyal Girişimcilik Ağı'nın 2 yıllık hikayesini aslında sayılarla, ulaştığı coğrafyayla şöyle bir dinlemiş olduk. Ardından ağa takılanlar, ağdan yolu geçenler ve ağı öğrenenler oturumuyla 12 farklı durakta Türkiye'nin 8 farklı şehrine ulaştık ve ağın faaliyetlerini bir bunları çoğaltanlardan, türetenlerden aslında dinleme fırsatımız oldu. Sonrasında paralel oturumlarda 3 gruba ayrıldık ve sosyal girişimlerden satın alma, sosyal girişim işbirliği örnekleri arasında yerel yönetimle işbirliği geliştirenler ve Türkiye'de sosyal girişimciliğin hukuki statüsündeki ihtiyaçları ve önerileri uzmanlarından dinleme fırsatımız oldu. Ve son olarak da az önce sosyal etki yönetiminde yeni trendler neler ve dünya nereye gidiyor bunları duyduk. Şimdi aslında ben salondaki 2 katılımcımıza bugün onlar için nasıl geçti ve Türkiye Sosyal Girişimcilik Ağı'nı takip ettikleri, şahit oldukları kadarıyla son 2 yılda nasıl gördüler diye bir onlara dönmek istiyorum. İlki Dünya Bankası'ndan sevgili Arzu Uraz. Arzucuğum, sosyal girişimcilerle çalışmaya başladınız, sosyal girişimcilik alanını geliştirmeye başladınız. Bu noktada TSGA'nın ekosistemdeki yeriyle ilgili senden çok kısa ve belki bugünle ilgili 1-2 cümle duyabilir miyiz?
Tabii, elbette. Merhaba herkese, merhaba İstem. Teşekkürler son sözü bana verdiğiniz için. Sabahtan beri dinliyorum. Gerçekten hani kendi çapında ilkleri hani geçirdiğimiz bir gündü. Bu kadar farklı aktörün bir arada olması, bu alanla ilgili nasıl iyileştirmeler, geliştirmeler yapılacağı konuşuldu. O bakımdan ben çok heyecanla takip ettim. Yaklaşık zaten hani sosyal girişimcilik alanıyla ilgili 2008 yılından bu yana bir şekilde öyle ya da böyle içindeyim. Hani bilenler bilir. Ben aslen sosyal kalkınma uzmanıyım ve Dünya Bankası'nda bu yaklaşık 8. senem. Ve biz yani kalkınma örgütü olarak uluslararası kalkınma alanında önemli finansörlerden biri olarak da dünya çapında hem sosyal hem çevresel etki hem de yönetişime yönelik, yani bu Ben Carpenter'ın bahsettiği ESG alanında zaten varlığımızı hep sürdürüyoruz. Yani yaptığımız bütün yatırımlarda da bu önemli işimizin bir parçası. Sosyal girişimciliğe destek de Türkiye özelinde yeni girdiğimiz bir alan diyelim. Yani finansmanını sağladığımız ufak tefek pilot projeler var ve umuyoruz ilerleyen zamanlarda kalkınma ajanslarıyla beraber bu sahayı büyüteceğiz. Bence ağın en önemli özelliği gerçekten hani birleştirici ve kolaylaştırıcı yönünün yanı sıra savunuculuk faaliyetlerini giderek arttırması ve bunu da politika yapıcılarla, kanaat önderleriyle beraber hani kuvvetini birleştirip sürdürmesi. Özellikle ben oturumlardan bu hukuki statü kısmını dinledim. Yani Işık Bey'in ve ekibinin yaptığı öneriler çok spesifik, çok hani çalışılmış önerilerdi. Onu görmek gerçekten çok güzel. Benzer şekilde bu alana ilgi duyan, bu alanla yani hani iş başlatmak isteyenlerin ilk başvuracağı durak bu ağ olması gerektiğini düşünüyorum. Ve ondan sonra da bu ağdan sonra da ilgili aktörlere yönelir diye düşünüyorum. Ben bu şekilde tamamlamak istiyorum son sözlerimi. Sağ olun, kolaylıklar. Yarın görüşmek üzere.
Çok teşekkürler Arzu. Bir kişi daha var sesini duymak istediğimiz. O da aslında ağın yine aktif sosyal girişimcilerinden. Anlatanellerin kurucusu Pelin Baykan. Pelin, senin için Türkiye sosyal girişimcilik ağı ne ifade ediyor? Bugün seni şaşırtan, yeni duyduğun, heyecanlandıran bir şeyler oldu mu?
Öncelikle bütün ekibe çok teşekkürler. Gerçekten hani keşke yüz yüze görüşebilseydik ama sizi uzaktan da olsa böyle bir süreçte görüyor olmak çok büyük bir mutluluk. Çok kıymetli bir şey. Günüm gerçekten çok güzel geçecek çünkü çok güzel başladı sayenizde. Türkiye Sosyal Girişimcilik Ağı ile beraber aslında ben 2016 yılından beri sosyal girişimciliğin içerisindeyim, anlatan ellerle beraber. Bu ağla beraber yalnız olmadığımı ve asla yalnız kalmayacağımı öğrendim aslında. Bu 2 yıllık süreçte ve bundan öncesinde sizleri teker teker tanıdığım o günlerde. Çok kıymetli çalışmalar var içeride. Farkında olmadığımız, bilmediğimiz, belki araştırmadığımız, görmediğimiz farklı etkiler ve farklı çalışmaları gerçekten bize gösterdiniz bu süreç içerisinde. Ve Türkiye'nin çok farklı yerlerine, 8 şehir diyorsunuz, 8 istasyon diyorsunuz, oralara ulaşıyor olmak, orada farklı fikirleri anlatan eller içerisinde veya farklı işbirlikleriyle nasıl geliştirebiliriz düşünmek gerçekten kişisel olarak da çok güzel bir gelişim, çok kıymetli. Bugün ben özellikle yerel yönetimler oturumuna girmek istedim. Çünkü anlatan eller için 2020 biraz enteresan bir sene oldu. Aslında hepimiz için, biraz da bizim için biraz bireysel bakacağım olaya. Fakat böyle yeni bir güçlenme, yeni bir adım atma gibi bir istekle başladık yeni döneme Eylül ayından itibaren ve o oturuma girmek istedim. Çok kıymetli bilgi paylaşımları oldu. Gerçekten bu işi yapanlarla ve bu adımı atmış olanlardan bilgi almak çok kıymetliydi. Farklı bilmediğim şeyleri keşfettim oradan. Nasıl gitmeliyiz, nasıl konuşmalıyız, nerede hata yapıyormuşuz? Yani o hatayı görmek farklı deneyimleyen kişiden çok büyük bir mutluluktu. O yüzden tekrar çok teşekkürler bu oturum için. Yarın daha güzel olacağını ve ilerleyen günlerde anlatan eller için daha büyük bir güç olacağını düşünüyorum bu oturumların. Biraz da duygusal bitireyim cümlelerimi. Ben güneş hep içimizde varsa umut var demektir diyorum kendime. Fakat güneşimi yakın zamanda yavaş yavaş kaybettiğim bir noktadaydım. Hem bu Covid sürecinden ötürü. Sanırım güneşimi yeniden tutmamı sağladınız. Emeklerinize sağlık. Çok teşekkürler her şey için.
Wow, Pelin çok teşekkürler. Bu kadar kısa şeyle böyle bir konuşma yaptığın için ayrıca çok teşekkürler.